Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. The corpse in the city. The car comes to a halt at the far edge of the car park behind the bank. Tom sits quietly for a moment, as if in a trance, eyes forward. Only his left arm moves as he pulls on the handbrake. His eyes drop, focusing on his finger, pressing the button to release the boot lid. Slowly, he turns his head and glares. "Are you going to help me or not?" Jim lets out a puff of breath, leans his elbow on the car door, and stands up. His shoes crunch on the dark gravel. The car park is deserted. With wide eyes scanning the area, he moves to the rear of the car and begins wrestling with the wheelchair. This thing's worse than a deck chair. Jim whacks the wheelchair onto the ground and rubs his hands across the seat as he finally gets it unraveled and stable. Tom opens the rear passenger side door and unclips the seat belt that is holding his Uncle Charlie upright. There is now an urgency in his manner. His breath comes in short, sharp bursts as he scurries round the back of the car, slams the boot shut, and then crawls along the back seat toward Uncle Charlie. "Line the chair up, Jim. You pull and I'll shove." Tom places one palm on Uncle Charlie's shoulder, one on his hip, groans and pushes. Jim tugs on a resistant arm and leg. Eventually, Uncle Charlie lands with a flop on the seat of the wheelchair. Jim tugs at the black overcoat to straighten him up, tucks in his arms, and lifts his feet onto the footrest. The sound of 4 doors and the boot closing echoes around the vacant car park and surrounding tall buildings. Yellow lights flash, showing the car is now securely locked. Standing back, Tom inspects his Uncle Charlie. "What does he look like?" "Dead," says Jim. "Pull his hat down over his face a bit more." Jim grabs the rim of the dark brown trilby and forces it over Charlie's head, then tilts it forward, covering Charlie's eyes. Tom takes another look and nods his approval. Gathering the strap from the back of the footrest, he buckles in his uncle's legs and then wraps a green tartan blanket tightly around them. He places a second blanket across his uncle's lap, covering his uncle's hands, and tucks that securely in down the sides. He straightens his back and breathes out a satisfactory sigh. "That'll do. I'm not happy doing this," says Jim. Tom's head spins round. "What? I'm not happy?" "Well, you're a bit late telling me that. If you want some of the money, then you'd better start feeling happy right now." Jim mumbles under his breath, snatches the handles of the wheelchair, and begins pushing it across the loose tarmac of the car park toward the exit. His breathing becomes labored as the wheels spin in every direction. Charlie's head bobs up and down, loosening the trilby. Tom reaches over to straighten it out as Jim marches onwards toward the smooth pavement and the bank entrance. I'll do all the talking. You just agree with me if they say anything to you. The blood drains from Jim's face. He says nothing. The two men push the wheelchair into the bank and join the queue. Jim hums to himself. Tom prods him. Jim stops humming. Tom fiddles with his Uncle Charlie's hat and the buttons of his overcoat. Are you all right there, Charlie? Won't be long now, and we can get you home for a nice cuppa. Jim stares at Tom in disbelief. Tom kicks Jim in the shins. Ouch. Next. The cashier's voice booms across the interior of the bank. Can we withdraw some money for my Uncle Charlie, please? Tom points to Uncle Charlie in the wheelchair as he hands over the slip of paper. Is he all right? Says the cashier. He's had a stroke. Sorry to hear that. It's a lot of money. We don't normally deal in such vast sums. He's going into a home tomorrow, and he needs the money to buy bits and pieces. You know what it's like. The care homes take all your dosh. I do indeed. The cashier smiles. If you'd care to wait, I'll sort this out for you. I see your uncle has already signed the slip. Well done, Uncle Charlie. Tom bends over the wheelchair and pats the knees covered by the blanket. Charlie does not move. The cashier returns, stamps 3 sheets of paper, smiles, and hands over a large envelope full of notes through the slit underneath the protective glass. Next. Come on, Jim. Let's get out of here. Tom grabs the handles of the wheelchair, spins it round, and heads for the exit. Jim scuttles along behind as Tom races along the pavement back toward the car park. Tom turns the wheelchair round, tips it up onto the 2 back wheels, and drags it across the undulating ground. We did it, Jim. We did it. Tom lets out a muffled laugh as he squeezes Jim's biceps. Now, let's get the bastard back in the car. Tom checks the car park for pedestrians, then grabs the shoulders of his uncle. Jim unbuckles the legs and takes hold of the ankles. Between them, the 2 men heave the motionless mass into the car and slide it along the back seat. Jim spreads the 2 blankets on top and throws the wheelchair into the boot, then sinks into the passenger seat. The engine revs as Tom's white knuckles grip the steering wheel. The car speeds out the exit as the spinning tires kick up black tarmac. What are you going to do with Uncle Charlie? Says Jim. We've got to put him where they can't find him. There's a skip over there. Jim pointed. Don't be daft. What about one of those giant green bins? There's one outside the Dog and Badger. Are you mad? We can't just dump him anywhere. The police will find him. It's got to be somewhere. No one knows. We're going back to my place now, and we'll get rid of the knobhead later tonight. We've got to do it soon, before he turns black and smells. Tom stops the car in front of the garage, while Jim jumps out and opens the doors. The car shunts forward. Tom switches off the engine and gets out. He helps Jim secure the garage doors, and then they both go into the house. Jim sinks into the nearest armchair and immediately falls asleep. Tom races upstairs and jumps in the shower. He looks at the clock. They've got to be on the move before midnight. Tom carries the 2 suitcases downstairs and places them by the front door. He nudges Jim awake. In whispers, he tells Jim to hurry and organize himself, as they must deal with Uncle Charlie on the way to the airport. Jim rubs his eyes, goes into the kitchen, drinks a glass of water, grabs a biscuit, and then goes into the downstairs toilet. When he comes out, Tom tells him to take the 2 suitcases and put them in the back of the car, and not to forget the coil of rope that is hanging on a hook just inside the garage door. Jim puts the 2 suitcases and the coil of rope in the car. Tom starts the engine and backs out. He stops the car in the driveway, gets out, and checks the front door and closes the garage doors. Where are we going, Tom? To that new industrial estate they're building on the outskirts of the city. It's on the way to the airport. They arrive at the new industrial estate, and Tom parks in a mud-filled lay-by near some railings at the end of the no-through road. Get the rope and tie it tight round that shithead's chest. Make sure you go under his arms with it. Jim takes hold of the rope, pushes it under Charlie's back, and ties it in a tight knot over his chest. Tom takes a jemmy from the boot of the car and lifts a manhole cover and drags it to one side, close to the railings. Tom grabs the rope and lugs Charlie out of the car. Charlie hits the ground with a loud thud. Tom and Jim take an in-breath and look around. Silence. Tom continues dragging Charlie across the mud to the waiting hole. Now you help me lower him in. Slowly, they eke out the rope and lower Charlie into the hole. Then secure the end of the rope onto a girder near the top and replace the cover. Will he be all right? Says Jim. What do you think? Says Tom. What'll I do with the blankets and the wheelchair? Says Jim. Tom points to some bushes behind the car. Throw them over there. Jim takes the blankets and slings them over the bushes, and then heaves the wheelchair in the same direction. Come on, Jim. We've got an hour's drive to the airport yet. Okay. Tom sits back in the seat on the airplane and sips his red wine. Jim's head falls forward, and loud snoring pours forth from it. Tom and Jim pull up a stool at the beach bar, their favorite haunt from previous Spanish excursions. Relaxed and smiling, they order a beer and proceed to quench their thirst for the high life. A heavy hand on their shoulder makes them jump as the tanned, bulky torso of a man stands between them. Don't normally see you 2 idiots here this time of year. Tom flops his head forward, clearly relieved to see it's a friendly face. Hi, Jack. No, you're right. Just visiting for a bit. And where's Charlie? The old bugger hasn't snuffed it, has he? Tom coughs. Jim swallows hard. No, he's fine. Didn't want to come. We've left him hanging around back home. The chants of a half-dead man and Dr. Jane White sound filled the living room as Jane struggled to find her TV remote. Soft pillows scattered all over the carpet, leaving a minimal space for Jane to stomp around angrily. She never liked the white sound, Haunting as it is, Jane tried to calm herself and collect memories of where she placed her TV remote. Her hand slips into the crease and the fold of her sofa, grasping at the empty space in between. Jane moved her hand slowly to the corner of her sofa, and her hand finally hit something. She grabbed the object and surprised when she saw it was her remote, aging with the dust that have reside inside her sofa. Relieve. Welcome her as she turned the TV off. Something heavy still tugging at her mind. If she hadn't been working so late, she might not miss her favorite show again this week. A soft tune started to pull her way from her tired mind. Jane rise to find her phone. Ugh, again? Why do I keep forgetting my things? Her lovely mother would be laughing at her for such silly behavior a doctor can have. Jane suddenly misses her. It's been 5 years since her mother passed away. Yet her laughter and smile still here with Jane. She hopes it will never fade away. Jane lifts her foot carefully to walk between the messy pillows, focusing herself on the tunes from her phone. One missed call had waited for her before another call struck. Jane was shocked that her cousin was the caller, for it was highly unusual of Charles to call late at night. Wave of panic came knocking before Jane braced herself to pick up the call. Hello, Jane? Charles's voice was shaky. Panic surged through Jane completely. Charles, are you okay? Jane started to walk away from her living room. I need help, Jane. Can you come to my house right now and bring your medical bag? Please, Jane. A lightning struck her heart, and Jane ran to her room upstairs. I'll be there. Don't worry, Charles. You're going to be okay. She hated to ask questions, especially the ones she knew she won't like the answer. Charles have a dire reason why to call Jane that night. They were close when they were kids. Their memories of childhood are blended together. Not a single memory without each other. Jane was driving at a high speed because the stream in her head won't stop worrying about Charles. She had tried to blur it out, just like every bloody wound she had to stitch, and every smile she had to put at the end of it all. She won't be okay at the end of the road for this, but being a doctor and a friend for Jane means more than her mental state. What become of it is that Jane can only feel the cold wind of the night. No more warmth. Every time she looked at the mirror, all she can think about is how dark her eyes are and what people might think happened to her when they saw it. Jane slowed down her car as she drives towards the house gate. For a businessman, Charles was very successful. Family and friends never knew what he was selling or buying to be this rich, almost drowning in his own gold, really. The gate automatically moved to open up a path for guests. Optical sensors and cameras cover every inch of the house entry. watching its newcomer every day. Authentic English patterns made the dark metals of the gate seem stronger, unbreakable. Solid walls keeping the vulnerable secrets safe within. Smoke diffused and expanded from his cigarette as Jane watched an old man waiting for her at the lobby. A familiar face running close behind him. Charles. Quick! Chandelier lights glimmer above. Its reflection made Jane's dark red hair burns with shades of amber. Jane rushed inside the grand house, certain of her steps, diving into the role of Dr. Jane again. Blood trails all over the white marble of the house. Charles lead the way into a dark hall, then down the stairs. The room was more like a morgue than a basement, or maybe a combination of both. Jane can't tell why Charles has this odd room. She was expecting a knife cut, or maybe a sprained ankle, rather than a grim room, that smell of blood and alcohol. Charles seemed fine and had no difficulties in movement when Jane saw him. Another man had been waiting instead of those images of Charles hurting. His skin was pale despite having a bronze tone. Bluish shade of his lips and under eyes removed the warmth of a living man. He had lost a lot of blood. Jane began to worry that he might not survive. Charles held the man's hand as he waited for Jane to prepare her kit. The mysterious man was bare-chested. Someone tore his shirt to press it on his wounds. "No, I forgot my suture. I can't patch him up." "I got it. Anything that you need. Here." Charles pointed at a small white cupboard not far from him. Through the glass, Jane saw a complete collection of basic surgical equipment. She stopped for a moment, wondering how come a normal businessman own a complete surgical equipment. Maybe countless times he had been in this situation. "Jane, hurry, please." The word struck like a punch in the face. Jane does not want to let her suspicion rise and get the best of her. The mysterious man needed Dr. Jane, and that is what he will get. Jane laid all the medical equipment on the table next to the surgical bed. One thing was missing from Charles's collection: the anesthetic. "You don't happen to have any anesthetic, do you?" Jane feared the answer to her own question. His ocean eyes moved from left to right in distress, trying to figure something out, debating a will within himself. A simple headshake is what he gave in the end. Jane tried to collect herself and keep a steady state, both for herself and Charles. She hates to see someone hurt, and she hates to be the one doing the hurting. There's no one in the room but the three of them. That gave Jane an unexpected relief. Slowly, and one by one, she overcome the surgery. Aseptic conditions before reaching for the gloves and mask. Deep breaths before examining the wound. A small pause before sanitizing it with iodine. The brown liquid trickle down from each sides of the wound. His right shoulder was the first one she cleaned, then the one above the abdomen, a little to the left, almost to the heart. Whoever struck this man have planned the attack, explicitly to weaken this man before struck his heart. Jane examined the red line on his shoulder. It was clean, very sharp object, not too wide, not too deep. The angle of it looked like there was a struggle before the object wounded his skin. A gash under his eyes said the same thing, but the object seems to be blunt. Bruises accompanied his jaw and cheekbones. As the time passed by, Jane worried that his features will match his bruises. If she can be fast enough, maybe this man will live. Jane started to understand the rhythm of Charles's breathing. He was so still when Jane punctured the first needle to stitch the man's right shoulder. Then Charles started to ease up when she moved to the next wound, closing each bloody gap, step by step. All the hours spent at the hospital always meant something to her. It is not only to fix physically, but also mentally. People got attached to so many things in their life. Countless things. They can't properly heal until there is nothing left but the old traces of scar. As a surgeon, Jane always felt she fixed people, gave them a help to heal. Fixing and giving, that is all there ever was. Helping people to find their strength again, grow from their experience. She was there when a mother cried for her dead son, taken too soon after 5 years of battling leukemia. She was there when a single father decided to permit donation of his son's organs. The son died of car crash. She had failed to save their child, but she was there to help them heal too. She told them of how their child fight for them, thinking of their family at their last moments. There are times when Jane gave a mother her newborn conjoined twins, separated by surgery, but all well and healthy. They will have a scar forever, but that scar will be a reminder of their fight, even before they can remember. Jane had been a part of that. She was more than glad to be a part of that. Mother always told her to help people, do everything from the bottom of her heart, genuine and certain. Believe that there will be a relief for every difficulty. As the last stitch sealed, Jane released a slow breath. She placed clean pieces of bandage over the man's wound. Though not as pale as he once was, the man was laying still and unconscious on the table. He might wake soon after this. Make sure he's hydrated. No alcohol, Charles nodded, his eyes distant. He's holding his breath, waiting for the moment when the mysterious man finally opened his eyes. Charles looks almost drowning in fear. Something glinted in his eyes, something Jane never seen before. One question: What happened? Jane hated the question. It would be easier for her if Charles just spill everything. They both know it won't happen. Jane took her gloves and mask off, avoiding Charles's eyes. Still, she wanted to hear everything in its full truth. You know I can't. You don't want to get involved more than you already are. His eyebrows creased. Anger and regret rise up in him at the same time, waiting for Charles to open the door and release them. For so many reasons, he deserves to feel that way tonight. Okay, it's obvious, Charles. Her eyes darted to him. Jane realized tears had gathered in his eyes and slowly spilling out. What do you mean? Charles ran a hand through his hair. Memories, uninvited, flashing in his brain. If you're going to play game of secrets, so be it. There is a long and dangerous story behind this. Jane, sure of it. It is not her place to push Charles. A shallow understanding came for her like leeches. Heavy for now, but light for later, she thought. He got some deep wounds. He barely makes it. At least, if you care about him, you'll need me again. What had the help meant? What was the urging reason for a woman to save a mysterious, half-dead man in the middle of the night? Something in her awakened. A warrior, ready to take everything by the tip of her spear. Jane saved a man. She will give him medications. Help him gain his health again. A chance to build again. Jane fear the chance will take chances. Can it be real? Had she just saved a criminal's life? What does the fixing and giving means now? Stream of thoughts had preceded her kind intentions. Leaving the cold and soundless room behind her, Jane walked away. Sins and sinners. Secrets carry weight like lead. Iris inhaled the pleasant air, which was ripe with the dewy petrichor of the post-rain evening. A cool breeze ruffled the leaves of nearby lofty mango trees, all of which were well endowed with succulent yellow mangoes. The sky was shades of pretty pink and purple pastels, making her way down the narrow path between the tall trees. She recollected her memories with Dante, Isabel, Rhett, and Jax, running along the shore, pushing each other in the sea, and dreaming about sailing the world one day. They would stand and watch the sea crash onto the shore for hours, and it'd still never be enough. She remembered standing on the cliff with her friends and taking in the salty sea breeze. When the sun would set, the vast body of water would reflect the warm colors of the endless sky, and there hadn't ever been a more beautiful sight. She'd gaze at it for hours, fantasizing about unending aspirations and dreams. Iris traced the carvings on the trees she used to very much enjoy making, with scraps of metal and pieces of wood she mysteriously found every day. She suspected It was Jack's, always doing these little things for her that could brighten her day. He could rarely say no to her, which led to them being part of quite questionable activities. She'd once said that she wanted to visit the yearly carnival on her birthday, and the next day she found the gleaming golden entry tickets of the carnival on her bed. She didn't really question where he got the tickets from, since they cost a lot, and he wasn't from a rich family. But she did remember him mentioning a friend who owed him a favor. Isabella and Rhett had been so jealous that day. Iris giggled, recalling the look on their faces as she ventured further on the narrow path between the tall trees. The pastel-colored sky started to fade away into the dark shadows, from dusty lilac to indigo, and from indigo to inky black. A cool breeze blew, ruffling the leaves of the nearby mango trees, which were swaying to the notes of the wind. Iris shuddered, feeling the wind on the bare skin of her arms. She had half a mind to spend the whole night there, but even she knew it wasn't the best decision to invite the dangers lurking in the dark. Too lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice where she was keeping her foot. Instead of stepping on the hard rocks and stones, she stepped on the muddy soil. Her eyes went wide as she tried to grab a stray branch in hopes of regaining her balance. But down went she, and the stray branch with a thud. Dear Lord, things just can't go right for too long, is it? Iris internally screamed. Holding on to the bark of a nearby tree, she got back up on her feet with much difficulty and brushed off the dirt from her limbs. She looked up at the night sky, where millions of stars were in close clusters. But the full moon blazing in the sky was even more beautiful than the stars around. She smiled as she thought of the days she and her friends used to gaze at the moon together and talk about a fictional world that was everyone's personal paradise. Sadly, growing up had burst her bubble of believing that she could ever live in a place where the sky met the seas. With a sigh, she looked at the rich brown soil, padding around to look for her phone. Walking around in the mud, leaving her footprints behind, she heard a satisfying crunch. A shiver ran down her spine, and she visibly shuddered. Believing that the sound was of her own footstep, Iris took a step backward and crouched down. She started digging around in that area, throwing away the twigs, leaves, and lumps of soil she came across till she felt something papery. Scrunching her brows, she pulled up the small piece of paper from the ground and held it in her hands. The paper was tattered and torn from the edges and dust-laden with a tint of yellowish tan. She blew air onto it and wiped off the remaining dirt on her white blouse, leaving behind an unlovely stain. It's not like it is clean anymore, to begin with, Iris huffed. Squinting her eyes and looking closely at the paper, she realized it was a photograph a photograph of a younger version of Rhett, Jax, Isabella, and herself. Huge grins showing their crooked teeth and resting their arms on each other's necks. Those wonderful memories came rushing back to her. But the small smile on her face vanished as she remembered how her wonderful childhood had a terrible turn of events. Chartusa. Rhett had always been the golden child in their circle. However, he did have a mean streak to him. Envy rolled off him whenever someone else outdid him. Over the years, harmless cursing turned into aggressive shoving, pushing, and malevolent acts driven by hostility. He was at the point where he used to be jealous even when Jax, Isabella, and Iris used to hang out in pairs sometimes. Isabella called it a phase of extreme insecurity. Perhaps he felt that his friends wouldn't want to hang out with him if he wasn't the best. Perhaps he believed the quote, "Either you're something or you are nothing at all," a bit too much. Nonetheless, whatever it wasn't going to end well for him if he didn't change his unpleasant behavior. She'd contemplated on staying away from Rhett, but Isabella told her that they wouldn't want his situation to worsen. She had reluctantly agreed. After a few days, Rhett's birthday arrived. Isabella had decided to throw him a surprise party that would cheer him up. Iris and Jax helped her decorate, and all of them awaited Rhett's grand arrival. Grand was an understatement. Rhett had arrived, reeking of strong alcohol, ignoring the presence of Isabella and Iris. He headed straight towards Jax and held him by his collar. His lips curled in disgust as he uttered some unmentionable words. Processing the enormity of what just happened, the girls ran towards Rhett to pull him away from Jax. But Rhett already managed to land a punch on the poor guy's face, escaping the grip of Isabella and Iris. He kept on punching Jax till his knuckles were bloody. Horrified, Iris grabbed the nearest object which she could find, which turned out to be an iron-made decor, and slammed it against Rhett's head. Ceasing his torture on Jax, he brought his hand towards his bleeding head and caught a few drops of blood on his fingertips. He felt lightheaded as black spots started appearing in front of his eyes. In the cold silence that followed, all of them could almost hear Rhett's last heartbeats as he closed his eyes, took his final breath, and fell on the floor with a loud thud. "He's gone." Isabella broke the silence, her eyes void of any emotion. "I'm sure he's in a better place now." Isabella continued after no one spoke a word. "What have I done?" whispered Iris, tears threatening to come out of her eyes. It still seemed unreal. "You did what was right. You ended his reign of terror. Best he be dead than alive," Jax said, anger evident in his tone as he looked at the ghoulish body of his once best friend. "Why did he do that to you?" Did something happen between you two? Iris asked Jax. Not receiving a response, she prompted again. Answer me, Jax. I can't live with the guilt, but at least I'll die peacefully, knowing that what I've done was for the right reason. Did he need a reason any longer to punch the shit out of his friends? Said Jax. What happened between you two? She asked for the second time. Stop asking that question again and again, Jax said, his teeth grinding together. Why? Don't you realize what has just happened? How can you be so... Iris was at a loss for words. You know that's a bloody problem of yours. All you and your selfish nature do is present yourself as the victim. Stop making everything about you, Iris. Stop pressuring me. And it's you who has killed him, not us. Oh, so I should have let him beat you to death, is it? That would have been better than this, said Jax, his eyes icy as he stomped away, as if her soul could bleed an ocean through the eyes. That was the enormity of Iris's sobbing. Isabella hugged her, slowly rocking her body as if she was a little child. Iris, he didn't mean any of that. He is just upset. Anyone would have felt that way, I'm sure. What you did, it wasn't wrong. It was inevitable. You freed him from the evil inside, consoled Isabella, who had been quiet all this long. How do you even understand 1% of what we're feeling anyway? You didn't do any of this. Iris laughed humorlessly. Rhett was the closest to you than any of us. Didn't you consider him your friend? Don't you feel the least sad about it? You don't seem to be grieving at all. Just because I don't express it does not mean I don't feel it. And Rhett was as much of a friend to me as he was to the rest of us. Would you rather he attain peace through death, or rather he continue inflicting violence and chaos on us? Iris didn't say anything afterward. The weight of the guilt was heavy. Despair was a crushing force on her chest, constricting her breath and coloring the world around her. Black as she too was slowly engulfed by the darkness. Chantraya. That is exactly how a tragedy like theirs breaks one's heart, making one believe that the ending might still be happy until the very last minutes. Iris flipped the photograph, returning to the present day, and read the words she had written a long time ago. Which of us could say we were more sinned against than sinning? Unoccupied guest rooms were always hiding things. No one starts out wanting a guest room. It's usually an office first, but then you got fired and can't look at it anymore, so you throw a bed in it that you'll never sleep in. Sometimes it's a kid's room, but they've moved out into a college dorm room. It used to be storage, but then the divorce happened, leaving it depressingly empty. A studio for recording music, but the bass player was in a car accident, and the band broke up. Guest rooms are rarely ever intentional. It's more of a ritual, something society has deemed necessary. The presumption that someone wants to stay with you and your new husband. The poor friend grits their teeth, trying to pretend they can't hear you having sex, trying to make the stiff pillows into something they actually want to lay on, trying to breathe through the Yankee Candle Vanilla Wafer air freshener that's plugged into the wall. The window sticks after an inch, and they can't get it up all the way. They unplug it after everyone is asleep. But the smell has been cloistered in the room for so long that it will never smell like anything else. They put the pillow on top of their face and try to sleep. I stood in the doorway to this guest room without entering it. Untouched rooms give you answers. They offer secrets. This one had last been occupied by a dead girl lying face down in a pool of blood. I found out about the case through the police. That never happened. We didn't get along. Yeah? I barked into phone. A landline I had installed myself. Cell phones bothered me. Is this Alma? It was Detective Herbert Ross. He knew it was me. What did you want? I said, trapping the phone between my ear and shoulder as I took a kettle of hot water off the stove and poured it in my favorite chipped mug with my favorite raspberry tea. If this was about the parking tickets I'd never paid, I still wasn't going to pay them. If this was to call me in about the robbery I solved before them, I wasn't going to tell them how I did it. A girl's dead. I set the kettle down a little too hard. Hot water sloshed around inside. I stared at the swirling steam coming up from the cup. I wouldn't be able to drink it now, and I frowned. The cops never called for my help. I usually embarrassed them by figuring their cases out for them. As a PI, it was rare to get a call like this. You need me? Yeah. Can you come? I hesitated for only a moment. Yeah. What's the address? 325 111th Ave, Blaine. I'll be there in half an hour. I hung up and reached for the tea, hoping I could snag one sip. Burnt tongue be damned. The tea bag had broken. Blaine was a little forgotten neighborhood, 30 minutes from Minneapolis, where I lived. The town used to be nice and neighborly, where kids biked until dark and people shoveled driveways for the elderly. Now, it was dirty. Every house had this gray dinginess to it, like everyone had collectively decided 1 year to stop taking care of things. Lawns were overgrown. Cars were rusting away. Big lilac bushes and weeping willows were being taken out or cut down. It was like an anti-homeowners association, uglifying until everything was up to code. I showed up to the house, where only one police car remained. There was yellow tape in front of the door. A crowd of people stood a few feet away, muttering. I looked the crowd over quickly, but no one stood out. I lifted the tape and went into the house. Herbert was standing right inside, apparently waiting for me. Body has already been taken. He grunted. That's fine. I didn't get much from dead bodies. I knew Herbert would tell me anything I needed to know, because he had called me. Still, this was awkward. We both were uncomfortable, and it was obvious by how we refused to make eye contact, our hands shoved in our pockets. Husband found her face down in the guest room, stabbed multiple times, said the doors were all locked, no sign of forced entry. You ask the neighbors if anyone was skulking around? Herbert nodded. Nothing out of the ordinary. Seems like everyone keeps to themselves. What did she do? Who? The victim. What did she do for work? Oh, her name's Noelle Sharp. The writer? I asked, bewildered. She was known for gritty romance novels, turned deadly. Not my thing, but I knew her name. Yeah, I didn't know she lived here. He nodded again. They moved here a few years ago. Geez, why? Herbert shrugged. Husband, name Magnus, works for a painting company. She seems to make more dough. Where is he? Already down at the station. Guy's pretty numb. Won't say much. Yeah, well, his wife was murdered. I wondered if Magnus had convinced Noelle to move here. If he had done that thing that men do when they feel like their wife, or any woman, really, was doing better than them. So he tried to put her in a box, make her talents and abilities small and manageable, easy to swallow. How many shouting matches had they been through before Noelle had conceded to move into this shit box in the middle of Shitsville? Can I have a few minutes? I asked. Herbert nodded. I surveyed the entrance area. Stairs right in front of us, leading down into a dark, wet-smelling basement. A tiny hall leading into a kitchen. Living room to the left, dining room to the right. I gave the first floor a once-over. Dirty dishes in the sink, magazines on the coffee table. The trash was empty. No bag. I went up the stairs and found the main bedroom, bathroom, and the guest room. In the middle of the guest room was a huge blood stain. It was flecked around the room, on the walls, on the bed. The stain was dark against the gray of the carpet. I surveyed the room. One bed, one desk with a small lamp and wooden chair, one plush armchair near the window, overhead light, fixture, fan. There was a closet and a nearly empty bookcase, short and pudgy. Maybe something that one of them had been dragging around for years, couldn't bear to get rid of. Some furniture held on to you. I walked in and thought about the room. The carpet was gray, the walls were white, but it was an off-white. It was like the white had been darkened by something. I sat down in the armchair and looked around, pretended I was staying there. I went over and turned the light on. The fan spun slowly above me. I sat back down in the armchair and looked some more. I realized it had been blue. The walls had been blue, but they had been poorly painted over, once, in a hurry. I got up from the chair and went over to the closet. Inside, there was a plastic bin full of wrapping paper. There was a broken vacuum, a box of empty bags to be used for gifts, and a stack of towels and blankets for guests. I reached out and touched the unused things, linens that had never been unfolded. So, no guests, or maybe guests slept on the couch. And this room, like many guest rooms, was useless. I leant down at the carpet in the closet. I took a small pair of scissors I kept on me and cut off some of the carpet threads, slipping them in my pocket. I sat on the bed, and it dipped, like it was trying to swallow me. The room smelt of dust, and the duvet was covered in butterflies. I lay down and stared up at the ceiling. What was missing in this room? And then I bolted upright and stared at the blank walls and realized there was less dust in a few places. Sections where things had been removed. Pictures. There were no pictures. Herbert was standing outside, trying to get the crowd to leave. I stormed out. "Are you sure this wasn't a robbery?" I asked. Hebert looked over his shoulder, annoyance on his face at my outburst. It made the dispersing crowd turn, new interest compelling them to stay. "Nothing has been taken." "How do you know?" I asked. Husband confirmed. "You don't think, just maybe, he's a little fragile at the moment?" Herbert shrugged. "I'll have him do another walkthrough." I told him I was going to need to come back to the house again. I needed to think. He told me to call him first, before he did. We both knew I wouldn't. That I looked up Noel Sharp on the internet. I found relatives and close friends, and I called and talked to them. Everyone had lovely things to say. I asked about her writing and her hobbies. When I brought up the husband, people also had nothing but good things to say. The mother was the only one who sputtered on and on about how that low life tricked my daughter into marrying him. Worthless career, no family money. She could have married a Rockefeller. I didn't tell her Rockefellers didn't spend time in Minnesota. I found their bank information, social media accounts, insurance. He had taken her name. Previously had been Magnus Brown. He had a brother named Leonard. I called and talked to some more people and asked if they ever had parties. Who were the best friends? Who stayed in that guest room? No one had much to say. There had been a housewarming party, but never another party after that. I called Leonard and asked him about Magnus and Noel. Leonard was still shocked about Noel's murder, kept going on and on about how Magnus adored her. Noel was such a sweet girl. She was so kind to everyone. Great cook. I never read her books, but I knew she was good. Magnus just loved her. I told him to call me if he thought of anything else. I could see from their joint bank account that there was voodoo trouble. There always was. I carefully read through credit card statements, but nothing interesting sprung out. Not even a transaction from a dirty website. I sat by the window in my apartment, smoking until daylight. I waited a few days before going back to the crime scene. I called Herbert on the way to the house, and he told me basic things that I could have guessed. Death due to blood loss, internal injuries, no fingerprints on the knife or around the house, doors locked, nothing broken, husband staying with a friend. Husband's alibi checks out? Yeah, he was painting a town over. I have the address. I'll take it, I said. I could hear the frown over the phone. I already cleared it with the homeowner. You called me, I said with a shrug that I knew he could hear. He rattled off the address, and I wrote it on a Walgreens receipt. I stopped at a Home Depot and stood in front of the paint chip wall. I stared at the colors, the very berry purple and Derbyshire green. I took out the carpet clippings and held them up over the grays. The carpet color was rock candy. I was at a shabby, buttercup yellow, run-down house that had not been painted in a long time. An old man in an old red sweater answered the door. He was hard of hearing, and his eyes were swallowed up so far into his face that I figured he couldn't see well either. I told who I was, Alma Savage, private investigator, and asked if he had made an appointment to have his house painted. He talked about how this nice fellow had painted his house, how they had drunk beer and talked about baseball. I was confused for only a moment before a young woman with a pixie face and curly hair interrupted us. My father has Alzheimer's, she explained. The house was painted a long time ago. I asked her if either of them had talked to the police. She looked confused. The old man had been the one on the phone with Herbert. I parked in front of the Sharp house and called people again and asked them to tell me things they remembered about Noel and Magnus. Memories were precious and often wrong, but sometimes they were the only clues one had to go on. Kathy Green was Noel's best friend. She hadn't been able to talk to me the first time I called. Now she was somber, and her voice wobbled, but she talked to me. I had dinner with them every month. Magnus cooked the best meals. Magnus, I repeated. What about Noel? Nope. Noel didn't like cooking. Whenever we were alone, we always ate out. Kathy kept talking, clearly happy to have someone to talk to. They wanted kids so bad, but Noel had a miscarriage, and they never tried again. Magnus couldn't bear it. Had a vasectomy. I asked her when this happened. She said 4 or 5 years ago. I hung up and went back into the house, walking into the guest room and staring at it, realizing it was perfect size for a nursery. The schooner blue walls that had been painted over with Acacia white, the missing pictures, rock candy carpet. I lay on the couch in the living room and determined it was too uncomfortable for someone to sleep on overnight. No one stayed with the Sharps. I called Herbert, still lying on the lumpy couch. I need you to check something for me. Alma? Yes. I need you to tell me if she was pregnant. Noel? Yes. I'll call you back. Chad. I went into the main bedroom and looked over the dresser, where receipts and change and dollar bills and earrings lay. I looked in their closet at all of Noelle's comfortable writing clothes and Magnus's paint-covered clothes. I found photo albums and thumbed through them. Nothing but happy smiles. I looked for medication in the bathroom. Nothing. I dug into drawers and looked through cabinets. Finally, in the garage, I found boxes, unlabeled. I knew it was what I was looking for. I opened them. There were 7 bikes, none matching, all different sizes. Each one had bright pink or bright blue toys, blankets, onesies, pacifiers. Each one contained a cross-stitched rectangle, homemade, Flora Sharp, Theodore Sharp, Maisie, Cooper, Rachel, Kevin. There were photos of the finished rooms, walls different each time. Pinks named Azalea, Flower, Teaberry. Blues named Gentle Aquamarine and Breathtaking. I looked down at the boxes, at all the attempts, all the miscarriages. Kathy Green didn't know about this. Her best friend status was weak, watered down because Noelle was too broken or embarrassed or just didn't think it was anyone's business. No one slept on the couch. No one slept in the guest room. I surveyed the rest of the garage and saw some large, framed photos shoved in the corner behind a lawnmower that was covered with a tarp. I went over and pushed the lawnmower away. They were prints of Noelle's book covers, the missing pictures, and there was a bloody thumbprint on the edge of one, her 3rd book, Dangerous Illusion. My phone rang. I answered it, hands shaking. Was she? I asked, throat dry. She was pregnant. Fuck, I muttered. What? Magnus had a vasectomy a few years ago. We'll confirm that on our end. And if you do? I asked. We both knew the answer. If he'd had the operation, it meant Noelle had cheated. It was motive? Dad. I found Leonard's apartment the next day. When he opened the door, he was in a wrinkled t-shirt and boxers. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. His eyes were red, and his hair was unkempt. I told him who I was, and he let me in. He gave me a beer. It was warm. I chugged half of it in one gulp. When I swallowed, I asked, "So how long were you sleeping with her?" Leonard pretended to look confused. I waited. Then, after 4.5 minutes of silence, he put his face in his hands and started crying. I loved her so much. Magnus was always complaining, and she would come over and vent, and we'd drink, and we never meant to. Noelle was pregnant, I told him. His teary eyes grew smaller, beadier. Noelle had found out that day. I pushed on. She left the pregnancy test in the trash, and Magnus found it. You know he had a vasectomy. I didn't wait for him to confirm. Noelle was in the guest room, looking at the nursery she never got, hoping it would work this time. It could be you. And Magnus found her, killed her and took down the photos of her books. Couldn't bear to see them. All her accomplishments. She had money. Her name meant something. And now his own brother was fucking his wife. How did you know that? Magnus isn't staying with you. He's staying with a friend. He hates you. No. He choked out, shaking his head, like that would shake the words out. She only cooked for you. When she came over here to vent and drink and fuck, she'd cook for you. She never did that with him. What do I do? He asked, drowning in how much he hated himself. I looked around the drab apartment before turning my eyes back to him, shrugging. Ever thought about painting the place? The prankster, Lennox, was the golden child to a set of loving mother and father who believed her to be the most auspicious thing that ever happened to them. They never reprimanded her for her childish pursuits, let alone denied her anything she ever wanted. An army of helpers were always at her beck and call. She pulled immature pranks and toyed with them to her heart's content. Her impishness was further encouraged by her parents, who laughed it off her as a sign of childishness and immaturity. Asher, Freddie, and Sarah were all Lennox's best friends. They belonged to well-off families and were as unruly as Lennox. They were all indifferent to the pain their actions might cause to the person at the receiving end. A boy named Austin was the current target of Lennox and her gang. Austin lived in the servant quarters along with his father, who was a driver at Lennox's house. He was a nerdy and ambitious kid who wanted to support his father when he grew up. Lennox often instigated him to join her gang, but he politely refused because he was aware of the activities they indulged in. This made Lennox despise him, and she decided to hit him where it hurts. She stole the extra key of the servant quarters from her mother's bedside drawer and located the books she often saw Austin reading passionately. She set all of the book on flames, which left poor Austin crying bitterly. This was just one incident of the many that followed. Once Lennox's parents shrugged it off as a mistake. With the passage of time, Lennox became more obstreperous and even started talking back to her teachers when they rebuked her for her rebelliousness. Her partners in crime always did as she said and supported her in her petty pursuits. One day, Lennox was playing catch with her friends. One of her friends dared her to throw the ball as high up in the sky as the overhead rooftop of the adjoining house. Lennox, being the competitive girl she was, immediately accepted the challenge and flung the ball with all her might. But the wall hit the glass casement of the house, resulting it to crash into pieces. Lennox had failed to complete the dare. She headed towards the house to collect the ball, fuming with anger. She rang the doorbell. It was answered by an elderly woman whose gray hair was neatly tied in a bun. She was wearing a thick-rimmed black frame containing bifocals. She gave Lennox a sneering look and remarked angrily, "You broke my window, you insolent little brat. You will never get that ball. Get out of here. Shoo!" She shut the door with a loud thud that made Lennox flinch. Lennox returned to her house with her cheeks turned crimson red with anger and embarrassment. Her friends, who bore witness to the whole scene, were snickering at her, adding insult to the injury. "I'll make the old hag eat her own words and beg for forgiveness." She vowed to exact vengeance on the poor old woman who was her next target. The next morning, Lennox and her gang hatched a devious plan that would extinguish the fire of revenge ignited inside Lennox's heart. They dug up some information on the old woman and found out that she lived alone in that big house. They had decided to make a fool out of the poor old woman by making her come to a realization that her house is haunted. They made their way towards the old woman's house in order to execute their seemingly flawless plan. Everyone hid behind the car, parked right outside the house. According to the plan, Asher ran towards the house and rang the doorbell as many times as he possibly could, and Quickie joined his friends, who were hiding behind the car. A few minutes later, the old woman poked her head out of the gate and muttered something under her breath when she didn't find anyone standing on the other side of the door. She shut the door with all her might, which made a loud banging sound. Lennox felt amused at her frustration. This process was repeated thrice till the old woman was heaving tiresome breaths and sat on the pavement outside the house with beads of sweat forming on her forehead. She bent down and struggled to pick up her staff, which showed clear signs of exhaustion. A few moments after she went back into the house, Lennox declared that she would bang on the door this time, instead of ringing the doorbell. She headed towards the gate and started banging on the door with all her might. A few moments later, she heard a loud thud and the sound of a piece of wood falling on the ground. Curious to find out what had happened, she looked through the peephole of the gate and gasped as soon as she saw the old woman lying flat on the ground, along with her staff that had a significant tear in it as a result of impact with the ground. Lennox immediately rushed towards her house and narrated the whole incident to her mother in one breath. Her mother was shocked. "I am very disappointed in you, Lennox. I have always ignored your childish pranks because I thought you will eventually learn on your own that it is not okay to hurt people just for a few laughs." Her mother reprimanded her while calling the nearest hospital for an ambulance. The old woman was rushed to the emergency room. The doctors revealed that she had minor heart attack as a result of a strenuous activity. Lennox came to the hospital every single day to see the old woman, but she didn't have the guts to meet her. After a week, she finally found the courage to make amends for her mistake. She bought a colorful bouquet, a brand new staff for the old woman. When she arrived at the hospital, she came to know that the woman had left the country with her son, who had recently come from Italy. Lennox fell down on her knees and started sobbing. At that moment, she vowed to never pull pranks on anyone. She returned home and apologized to Austin and all the other people she had wronged throughout her life. Moral: in an attempt to satiate our ego, we often end up hurting people beyond repair.